Rivers bear brunt of unsustainable activities starting ecosystems. There is need for transformation and rights. Reveals pattern of intensification. Rivers become instrumental technologies and infrastructure. Brought efforts to direct water to serve human needs. Instrumental modes of engagement came hand in hand with the notions of human dominion over nature. Dams, canals, irrigations, and hydroelectric stations were built. Infrastructure overwhelmed and tightened. Caused vital wetlands to vanish. Industrial produced pollution, contributing to climate change. Governments focused on short-term technical solutions. This impelled an accelerating infrastructures that destroying the indigenous communities, override non-human species, infrastructural violence, primary factor to extinction of global ecosystems. How can societies regain sustainable relationships? There is much to be learned from indigenous people. They hope to persuade larger societies to reposition ways that are more attentive to non-human. Greater the diversity of habitats and water, greater will be biodiversity. U.S. is Center for Freshwater Biodiversity, richest diversities of animals in the world, ranks first in the number of species, ranks seventh in diversity of fishes, first and third in fish species. We share vulnerability, development, and species to climate. Each species represents library of options to adapt immunity and pass fitness on to future generations. Biodiversity is essential to human life survival. Every organism are indispensable aquatic wildlife, important sources of food, oxygen buffers, new diseases, and protections against food shortages. Diversity helps us discover new drugs, mitigate climate change. Researchers hunting for organisms that cure diseases. 40% of medicines are derived from natural plants. The world's food is dependent on few species. If new strain of disease or over-harvest reduces fish, starvation result to ensure food supply, we need to protect biodiversity. Localized ecosystems undergo abrupt, irreversible shifts when they are tipping point. We may be approaching tipping point in the global ecosystem, which consequences could be catastrophic for civilization. A planetary transition could precipitate losses of ecosystem required to sustain population. Results could be loss of human life. Biodiversity is a threat multiplier, exacerbate conflicts, and field terrorism. Bio constitutes existential threats. Degrowth faces burials. A key weakness of proposals will be taken up by actors. This is naive. Paradigm shifts. Institutional conflicts take place in number element to limit throughput through restrictions on extraction, forefront growth, while protecting those threatened growth. It is the contagious nature of lawmaking that comes to forefront. In degrowth, RON offered a vanguard policy. They have the ability to spread beyond governments. RON offers to indigenous groups in resisting extraction. It is extractive industries that are the targets of RON. It is these industries that grow organisms by the creation of natural resources. Federal rights of nature set framework of protecting resources and allow for guardians. Recognition has roots in indigenous cultures. Tribal religions cannot be considered in a vacuum, but in the context of primal world. The government assigned guardians to rivers. Advocates would be permitted to prefer a guardian who can focus on long-term representation of one river. Delegate funding, further support could be considered. Reduction in plaintiffs would be balanced costs of guardianships. Framework ensure legal representation of resources, interests, guardians, advice agencies of permit application. Guardians would have sustained case for river because advocacy, not limited case by case, because permanently guardianship advocacy would be broader than ADHOC participation. In litigation, ecosystems would be named party rather than property. Congress could be instrument for guardianship by establishing through legislature and not the judiciary. States' constitutional claims would be countered by private right of action. Parties from federal and state government, nonprofits, and tribal representation would represent diversified needs of citizens. Panel could balance needs of each entity. Reconsidering position in world is the biggest challenge of the century. We are diving the earth into extinction if we do not act now. There are ways to improve. Granting personhood imply we see as nature's subject instead of legal obligation. There are treaties and laws aimed at protecting nature. Those have not been effective enough. Economic interest usually wins over the illogical interest. Rivers with personhood. Change how we think about nature. We could see nature as having intrinsic value. Acknowledge that nature coexists with us, that we constitute systematic change in our thinking. Through legal representation, it becomes clear nature have the right to thrive, gaining rights, transform society systematic ways. Legal act strengthens new norms and structures in schooling and instructions.